I'd never obviously deployed up until that point, so I didn't know what to expect. So I remember boarding a freight C-17, which is very different to getting on one of the passenger ones, because then you've got no one else around you. I think there was a couple of army guys. And I sat up kind of in the cockpit for most of the flight, chatting to them, and managed to get some sleep in one of the, the cot beds and everything else. That was brilliant. And as we were just flying into kind of, that getting into that 40, 50 miles before landing, I put on one of the headsets to kind of listen to the chatter. So I was like, I want to see what air traffic sounds like, because I'm going to be on the other end of that, in days view. And I remember thinking, oh my word, they're speaking so fast. There's so many aircraft. There's so many languages. This is next level. I've not heard things like this before.
Steep learning curve.
How on earth am I going to get my head around that so quickly? And the handovers when you're on ops are very much shorter than when you're at home. You might take a year to get all your tickets at home. You've got to get them all in 2 weeks when you go on ops. And there was a lot of expectation because, I was going to be the examining officer. So there's that expectation that you are one of the best controllers because you're examining everybody else. But obviously you're then the newest person right then. So it's a very steep learning curve. But yeah, basic training was challenging in itself, and I'm really grateful actually looking back on it that nobody told me what to expect, because I think I would have gone home in the first week. So I think I just went into it thinking, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And I was optimistic throughout.
Just step by step, isn't it?
Yeah, just take every day as it comes. And then before you know it, the first month is over when you've been working almost solely with the regiment to kind of shape you up into doing your basic skills in the service. And you've done a lot of exercise, some quite challenging tasks. You've obviously learned how to use your rifles and all these other things. And by the end of month one, you think, I don't even recognise where I was on day one. It's, so much has changed. And that journey goes on for the entire 6 months you're there. I mean, going back to the sports side, I'd gone into Cranwell thinking, I'm quite a fit individual, I can go and run my 5K at a decent pace, I can, I'm good at swimming, but it's a different level. Again, my husband would laugh at this because he'd say, you've got no idea. But, when I turned up and they're like, the first one is a 10K, I was like, oh, okay, I'm sure it'll be fine. But some of the people on our squadron were so fast, that, they'd be off and you're thinking, I am one of the slowest on the squadron. So it came to swimming and I was like, do you know what? I know I'm a strong swimmer and I know there's some people here that really don't like putting their head under the water, so I'm going to be fine. But the swimming wasn't just regular swimming. It was circuits in the pool. It's jump in, swim underneath, pull yourself out the other side, 20 press-ups, go back in, swim underneath, pull yourself out, tricep dips, whatever it might be, but you never got your breath back. But ultimately, I still thought, I don't care, I feel safer under the water, I'm not getting shouted at. And I could just stay under the radar when I was in those types of lessons. It was running that was the really awful one. But it changed at a certain point. So I think the PTIs saw a small group of us who weren't great distance runners, well, not at speed anyway, and called us like the custard tart ladies, because we'd always go on these big runs after lunch where we'd probably had like 3 courses and then expect to go for a big run an hour later. And one day, I think they were trying to come up with some sort of way to make us not think about how tired we were. So they started asking us questions. They were like, right, I'm going to ask you a question while we're running. You're going to, shout the answer. And one of them asked me, what's your best sporting achievement? And I said, I came runner-up in the US Open squash under 16s. And he was like, oh, we kept on running. At the end of the whole exercise, he said to me, I'm on the RAF squash team. Do you still play squash? I was like, I've not really played too much in the last couple of years, when I've been working in London, but, I can pick it back up. He said, you need to enter the RAF champs. It's in, a month's, 2 months' time. You need to enter. I will get you off the course for 2 days to go and play in it. I was like, okay. And straight away, all of a sudden, the PTIs, how they looked at me as being a really bad runner, suddenly changed. I went, oh, but she's good at something. What is that thing? And he took me on court a couple of days later just to see kind of what he was dealing with in terms of squash ability. And he was like, she's actually pretty good. And now I thought I was pretty average, ex-county player.
So average, but you say you were second in the US Open.
Oh, yeah. So that was when I was 15. And I was probably a lot better player than I was kind of as I got older.
But that's still quite some achievement. But you just dropped in there that I didn't even know about you.
It sounds very grand, but, ultimately it's a tournament that it's not like playing in the tennis US Open, put it that way. But it's a junior tournament, but I did really well in it. I was playing well as a junior. And those skills translated through. So I went on court with him, I had a hit. I was playing pretty well because I was quite fit from all the training we'd been doing. And he was like, you're actually pretty good. I think you're going to do really well at the RAF Champs. I was like, I'm pretty sure I won't. And he went, you will. And roll on 2 months later, I went and entered the RAF Champs and came, runner-up. Just got to the finals, came second. And then suddenly the physical training department at Cranwell were very nice to me after that. They're like, okay, you're not very good at running, but you're clearly good at this, so we'll cut you some slack. So they started being a little bit nicer to me. So, but that's kind of where I think the service offers you so much in terms of there's a wider offer available to people because it's not just a job, it is a lifestyle. And one of the things that I loved about my time in the RAF was playing squash, because right from basic training, they identify, they're like, here's someone who can play squash, and they kind of fostered that throughout the years. And now I'm the chair of RAF and UK Armed Forces Squash because I've had 19 and a half years of a wonderful time being part of that association, playing squash, doing all the brilliant things you get to do when you're part of a sports association in the Air Force. And so now it's been my time this last few years to give back, to repay what I've had over the years.
It's also about finding your niche as well, because you're saying running, something that you could do, but you were much better at squash than you were at running.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe finding like what we're good at and developing skills. But also then I guess also with running maybe not being something that you naturally gravitated to, we also sometimes have to develop our skills in other areas as well, because that's how we grow. If we just stick to what we're good at, then we don't always grow.
No, absolutely. And I think that thing about being in your comfort zone, they say teach you those very basics, don't they, when you're going through basic training, in terms of you've got your comfort zone, you've got stretch, and you've got almost panic. And you don't want to be in panic, you don't want to be in comfort zone, but you want to be in stretch, because that's where the learning takes place. So I was aware of that when we were doing the running, but I still didn't really like it. I was verging on panic when I was out of breath. But everything else about basic training, I was definitely in stretch.
That's fantastic. And I think, the squash, that was maybe what you found through basic training that maybe really in the Air Force made you think, this is where I belong, this is the right choice for me, because it's something that you were really passionate about, and it gave you this incredible opportunity to play squash around the world.
Yeah, and we have had some amazing opportunities in squash. And I would say to anybody who loves sport, the services is a great place for you to foster that. When I look back of where we've been over the years, we've been to Washington, New York, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, that's just to name a few, Boston, so many squash tours across the world. And so I look back on that time, and it's also another little family I've made in the Air Force. I've got my friends that I've made along the way in all my different kind of jobs I've had, but squash has been consistent throughout all of it. And now when I go to events, and I've got a different role to play now as chair, but seeing all my friends at squash, it's so nice and refreshing and grounding again to see that little family that have been consistent throughout my 19 and a half years. So it's I would recommend it to anybody.
And what's lovely to hear about your story is this embracing of opportunities as they come up. When the PTI says, any sports that you're good at, or, and you say, squash, and then embracing the opportunity to take up squash within the Air Force, because that must have been quite daunting going to the RAF squash champs when you'd never played squash in the RAF before.
Absolutely, but the ladies there that I was playing against, I was really fortunate that the captain of the ladies team at the time, really lovely, all of them were absolutely lovely, still really good friends of mine now. And And over the years, as you grow within that team, I became the ladies' captain a few years later. Then I became the secretary of RAF Squash, and now I'm the chair. And it's because as you move up, you need to now be giving those opportunities to other people who are coming up and new and or finding the sport for the first time. So it's just I feel I don't want any thanks for that job. That is absolutely me thanking my squash friends in the association for what they've given me.
So after you finished your basic training, what came next in your career in the Air Force?
So I was obviously going air traffic control. So I went off to RAF Shawbury, where we did the Joint Air Traffic Control course. So it's the JATC. So that's where we do 6 months of basic air traffic control training for the terminal environment. Again, a very stressful course. I remember when I left university, I remember grandly saying to anyone who'd listen, I will never take an exam ever again. And then I joined air traffic control, where it's just this constant battle rhythm of examination. Move places, another exam, another ticket, another exam, assurance, another exam. It is literally relentless. And so I was like, I should never have said that. Should never have said that. Just lies. So so air traffic control, went through my basic training. There was 15 or 16 of us on the course. We were quite lucky that I think all of us got through the course way back then, but it was intense, really intense. One day would be in the simulators practicing the practical skills. The next day you might be doing some theory stuff and practicing, and then overnight practicing the phraseology for the next day of the sim. So it was full on for 6 months, but I was really fortunate. I think I naturally gravitated towards the radar element of it. So by the end of that course, I knew that I wanted to be going to area radar, so which at the time was based at West Drayton alongside Nats. So when we got to the end of the course, they would only put maybe one person off the course to area radar because you had to do further training, and you had to come pretty much at the top of your course, certainly in the radar credentials, to do that. And so I was really fortunate that I got West Drayton and area radar for my first tour, which as a first tourist was back then was quite the accolade. So I was absolutely delighted. And then I thought that was my training over. It wasn't. I then had to do a further month of training at Shawbury in the area radar kind of simulators before then I got transferred down to West Drayton, where we lived at RAF Uxbridge, which is, then the start of my first tour.
Were there any parts of that training that you found challenging, or any points where you thought, is this the right thing I've chosen? And you just needed a little bit of a helping hand, whether it was friends or your support network, just to help you keep going?
The very first sim, it wasn't even a sim, it was driving blips through gates on a computer screen. And considering that I went to be an area radar controller and then the commanding officer of the biggest area radar unit, I could not get this blip through this gate on day one. I was like, this is not for me. I've chosen the wrong thing. I should have done something totally different. I should not be an air traffic controller. I don't deserve to be here. But the instructors and all the friends around you are just like, it's day one. Do not worry about this. It will come. This is normal. And I think, getting that reassurance from people and that good coaching from people, and to some degree some mentoring from the more senior people who are on your courses as well, makes a real difference. So I was very grateful for the team of people I had around me going through that course, and for the instructors I had as well.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? The good instructors and that empathy as well for the instructors.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's what makes a good instructor is knowing when people need that little bit of boost of confidence to keep them on the right track. That's definitely the mark of some of the good instructors I've had.
That's going to be my next question. It's like we're telepathic.
There we go.
So what came next then? So you went to West Drayton.
Yeah, so that was a very, very weird place, in the fact that most of West Drayton was closed down, and it was literally just the area radar centre that was still operating there. So we lived at RAF Uxbridge, but we had to commute just down the road near Heathrow to where West Drayton kind of air traffic control centre was. For the first few months, there was still some civilian controllers there. They then moved down to Swanwick, because Swanwick was just opening, and we were just left there. So for about maybe a year, it was just a huge operations room, huge, with just some military there. And I remember specifically my first ever shift at Area Radar. And so we were in this room called the Mazor. Don't even know what it stands for, Military Air Systems Operations Room or something like that. It was a huge, really high ceiling room, massive room, with probably about 40 or 50 consoles all going around the edge of it. And because the military operations 24/7, they would have 2 of us on overnight to cover off the east sector of the country. And it was my first ever overnight shift. So I'd been controlling for about three months by myself. They were like, she's good to go. She knows, what she needs to do if she's on her own on the operation. You'd be in pairs. And I was paired up with a flight sergeant who, Vidal, who's one of my friends, and friends now, he wasn't back then. And we went on the shift together, and he turned around to me and said, here's a phone, don't call me, I'm going to bed. I was like, right, okay, so I'm on my own. This is not good, but it'll be fine. So I sat there and he went off to bed, and I thought, I'm not going to phone him, I'm scared of him. So put the phone there and then got my headset on and sat in front of the radar screen, poised and ready. And then I remember probably about 2 a.m, because the shift started at 11, about 2 a.m, I thought, I really need the toilet. And the toilet was miles outside the operations room. I was like, right. I phoned up some civil sectors and I went, have you got anything for me? Got anything for me? They were like, no. I was like, okay, fine. Run. And I sprinted out the ops room, making sure I had my pass in the otherwise you couldn't get back in again. Went to the toilet, came back in, sat back down, headset on, hoping nothing had happened. And then in the morning, said Flight Sergeant Vidal comes down at 7 a.m. All right, everything all right? Did you get some good sleep? I was like, no, because you were sleeping. So I was on, headset, poised, ready. He was like, oh, Chrissie. I was like, what? He was like, you don't get any free calls in the middle of the night. He said, you may get one pre-note, but someone will call you for that. So I'll wake you up. You could have just gone to sleep for the whole night. I was like, oh, I hate you. So I was like, somehow one day I will get my own back for this moment.
Did you?
No, but it was a case of, I learnt the hard way on the first night, but at least I was safe. That's why when it comes down to, I was safe, I was ready, but I was just a little bit naive back then, and I just needed someone tell me the way of how things were, and I learnt quickly after that.
So what was your next role?
So when I left West Drayton, we moved to Swanwick halfway through that, where I continued to do the same role. I built up my endorsements. I was a supervisor on my first tour at Area Radar, which was fantastic. And then I got posted to MOD Boscombe Down. A very strange base because it's very civilian. It's not your kind of main operating base, military. It's a test base, so you've got so many different types of aircraft. You've got rotary, multis, fast jets, so you've got a real mix of it. And I wanted to go there for location, really, because my family and friends were based on the south coast and it wasn't that far. But also it was the challenge, and everyone has said, when you've gone from Area Radar, you really need to go somewhere that's going to challenge you, because you've done some of the most challenging controlling. Go to somewhere busy that's going to be exciting, and Boscombe Down was busy and exciting. We'd have 3 circuits on the go and all sorts of stuff going on. You had to know how to deal with all the different types of aircraft. So I absolutely loved the controlling there. It was really good. And to do tower for the first time as well, because I'd just done radar up until that point, tower was super fun as well. Halfway through that tour, I became the deputy SATCO, just opportune moment. Even though I wasn't the most senior person there, I put my case forward why I should do it and got the role. And so enjoyed, an amazing 1.5 years as being the deputy SATCO there, which was eye-opening, because you obviously have to start honing a different skill set, because you're no longer just a controller. You've got all these other administrative, leadership, management functions you have to do as well.
So how did you find that then? Because that's a new skill set to learn. Did you feel, when you put yourself forward for that job, did you sort of feel a bit, am I good enough? A bit of imposter syndrome? Or did you just think, did you have anybody saying to you, no, you should really apply for this?
No, do you know what? That was one of the occasions, but I didn't have that imposter syndrome. I think I had it much later, but at that time, it was a case of, I think I was dating my husband back at this time, and he was about to go to Afghanistan, and the SATCO was looking and basically said to a lot of us flight lieutenants, who wants to be the next deputy SATCO? Come and sell yourselves to me. And I went in and gave my sales pitch of why it should be me, in terms of my credentials, how hard I'd worked, all the other things. And I finished it off with saying, and I have got nothing better to do for the next 6 months because my boyfriend's away. And I think he probably thought, oh, she's going to work extra hard. So there we go. Probably rightly or wrongly, but I added it in as part of this is another good reason why I need to be distracted for the next 6 months while he's in Afghanistan. And I think, hopefully it wasn't the reason why he chose me, but it was because I think having taken the credentials I had from Area Radar and then been able to apply them very quickly, actually, in that terminal environment, I was moving through those kind of terminal endorsements quite quickly, proving that I was a really solid controller as well. So I think, I was showing that I had capacity, and my wing commander at the time, so my 2-up, had kind of said to me, you really need to do more. And I was like, give me more and I'll do more. But at the moment, you're not giving me those opportunities. And so he gave me that opportunity, and that was, I didn't really look back after that. So, I had a great job as a flight lieutenant, in that role. And towards the end of my time at Boscombe, that's when they said, right, do you want to go out to Afghanistan in this time frame? I was like, this works perfectly. Because, again, the boyfriend now engaged to the boyfriend, Sam, he was going to Afghanistan again. I was like, this is brilliant. We can be there at the same time. Not that we'll probably even see each other because he was in some forward operating base. But timing wise, I was like, why not both be away at the same time? At least I'll be distracted. He'll be distracted. Perfect. So my next role was to be the examining officer in the tower at Camp Bastion, which was,
oh my goodness,
eye-opening.
Yeah. So how did you find it?
So I'd never obviously deployed up until that point, so I didn't know what to expect. I remember the early phase of it. I was supposed to get on a C-17, and the C-17 that was going to take me out was going to be late. So I was going to be late for my handover. So I remember phoning a friend, our mutual friend, Annabelle, and said, Annabelle, can you get me on an earlier C-17? She was like, yes, I can. So I was like, I can get on a freight C-17 earlier so I can meet my handover deadline with the poor person who's been out there who wants to come home. So I remember boarding a freight C-17, which is very different to getting on one of the passenger ones, because then you've got no one else around you. I think there was a couple of army guys on there with me, and we flew out to, I think, Turkey, where we then switched and then flew into Afghanistan. But fortunately, when they switched crews at Turkey, and a little bit embarrassing, but my ex-boyfriend was the next crew.
Oh.
Taking over in Turkey. And I didn't know this until he came down the back of the aircraft. He went, Miss Arrowsmith, would you like a more comfortable seat in the cockpit? And I was like, oh no. This is so embarrassing. But yes, I would. So well. But yes, I would like a more comfortable seat. So it was actually really lovely catching up with him. So he was then flying the final leg into Afghanistan. I sat up kind of in the cockpit for most of the flight, chatting to them, and managed to get some sleep in one of the, the cot beds and everything else. That was brilliant. And as we were just flying into kind of, getting into that 40, 50 miles before landing, I put on one of the headsets to kind of listen to the chatter. So I was like, I want to see what air traffic sounds like, because I'm going to be on the other end of that, in days view. And I remember thinking, oh my word, they're speaking so fast. There's so many aircraft. There's so many languages. This is next level. I've not heard things like this before.
Steep learning curve.
How on earth am I going to get my head around that so quickly? And the handovers when you're in ops are very much shorter than when you're at home. You might take a year to get all your tickets at home. You've got to get them all in 2 weeks when you go on ops. So I was thinking, have the headset back. And so... But just like anything else, take it a day at a time, and you arrive. You do kind of your arrival training where you go out on the range, kind of zero your rifles, those types of things. Get your accommodation, a load of briefs about being on Camp Bastion, security, that sort of stuff, and then you arrive at the tower, for your work to start properly. And there was a lot of expectation because I was going to be the examining officer, so there's that expectation that you are one of the best controllers because you're examining everybody else, but obviously you're then the newest person right then. So it's a very steep learning curve.
So did you have imposter syndrome at any point doing that? Because it sounds like an incredible learning curve, and suddenly you're expected to be the expert when you've still got the material to learn.
Do you know what? I think I would have had imposter syndrome if it wasn't for the fact that everything else was so uncomfortable because of being on ops and how the camp worked and the security aspects and everything else, that actually air traffic was my comfort zone. So even though I knew it was going to be stressful and tough, I thought, I've done this before, I'll get to grips with that. It's all of this that is foreign to me. And therefore, that's what was distracting my focus rather than actually air traffic. So actually, it was probably a good thing, because otherwise it could have been incredibly stressful.
So when you've got a lot on your plate to deal with, like that situation that you've just described, what advice would you give to anybody about dealing with a huge change, for example, or dealing with a lot on their plate, maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed? How would you suggest someone can work through those problems?
So I think dealing with a lot on your plate and dealing with ambiguity are probably two slightly different things. Dealing with ambiguity, I would say, you might think you know nothing about something in terms of a situation that's happening to you, but there are things you'll know. So, you know, I could have been going into this situation thinking, I don't know how to do that job yet, but I do know a lot of things around it. You know, I know regulations about air traffic. I know the people I'm going to be working with. I know the hours I'm going to be working. I know how long I have to get these endorsements. So I think in those times you have to focus on the knowns, and then you can kind of take one thing at a time after that. So you don't feel kind of overwhelmed immediately. When you're dealing with when you're dealing with a lot on your plate, I mean, a good example is actually this filming. I think you'll remember before Christmas, I had quite a lot on my plate with moving house, starting a new job, and I was like, I need to just turn off one or two things right now. Is it okay if we do this another month? Because actually I've got quite a lot, and not that I was feeling overwhelmed, because I stopped myself feeling overwhelmed by going, what is it right now that I can safely say, could I do this another time, please? What can I not afford to put off? Can't put off starting a new job, can't put off moving house, but I could potentially, you know, say, can I delay this to another time?
It's the importance of saying no sometimes, isn't it? Because sometimes if you say yes to everything and try and do everything, you end up not giving the best of yourself to any of the things that you're trying to do.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, when it's about capacity, you absolutely do have to say no to things that you think, because then you can give your best to it later on. I think when it's about personal development, it's a double-edged sword. You don't ever want to, we talked about it, put yourself in panic to say yes to do something you feel really, really uncomfortable with. But equally, you do need to say yes to things that are outside your comfort zone, because that's where the growth happens.
How you grow. Yeah.
Totally. So this, for example, I don't feel comfortable with being filmed whatsoever. But you've got to take the positives and say, but if I do more of this, I will become more comfortable with it and I'll grow a different skill set.
I think you seem really comfortable.